Hey, this is Joe, and welcome back for another video. We're getting ready to put the radiator back on the Suzuki GSXR 750. It came with an aftermarket radiator screen or shield, and the rubber strips on the shield were pretty gone. They were all crumbling and falling apart. So what I did was I taken some thin pieces of rubber sheet and used some double-sided tape, and we glued them together and cut some small squares, and about the same size as the original pieces of foam that were on this screen. So we're going to take and we're going to glue the strips on each of the corners. What it does is it keeps the radiator screen just slightly away from the actual radiator. So we'll go ahead and put those strips on, and then we'll mount the radiator to the bike and mount the radiator screen to the radiator. So let's get started. We can peel off the protective film, and then we can come in and we can stick the foam on each of the four corners. I'm using a small X-Acto knife to peel away the protective film. Okay, so we have one corner done. I'm going to go ahead and you got the idea now. I'm going to go ahead and do the other three corners, and then we'll get ready to mount the radiator. We have all four corners of the rubber foam on the shield now. Let's go over and we'll mount the radiator and the hoses to the bike. Make sure your hoses are connected and tight. Here's the top hose that goes into the cylinder head, and it routes to the right through the bottom side of the frame. I'll show you where that routes. Here's the same hose that routes from the top of the cylinder head down through, and it will mount to the right hand side of the radiator. This is coming from the engine case, and this will mount to the lower portion of the right hand side of the radiator. Let me go over and take you and show you the left side hose. On the left hand side of the motorcycle, back here is where your water pump is. You have an inside hose. This hose goes up to the front side of the cylinder head. The outside hose goes to the left hand side of the radiator. So you want to make sure all these hose clamps are all tight on the water pump side and on the back end side of the cylinder head. And then when you put the front hoses on, you want to go through and make sure all your hoses are tight. Let's go ahead now. We'll put a clamp on this hose. I have a clamp on the other hoses. Now we can go ahead and mount the radiator and the radiator screen protector. Let's go ahead and mount the radiator in. There's 3 bolts that have to be mounted. There's one at the top of the frame on each side. Here's your bolt. I'm going to go ahead and mount this one first. That way we have room to pivot the radiator to get the hoses in. Okay, let's go over to the other side and put the bolt in. Then that way we can have enough room to mount the hoses, and we'll put this screen back on. It mounts to the bottom of the mounting hole here on the bottom. I'll show that to you here in a second. We have the bolt on the far side. It mounts just like the bolt on this side. And now the radiator can pivot back and forth on the mounts. I've not tightened those bolts. That way we can get in and have plenty of room to put the hoses on. The smaller hose is using a pinch clamp. So we can slide that on, and then we can pinch the hose and put it on. I like to put the connectors or the clamps where you can easily unfasten them. Same thing on the top hose. Put the hoses onto the fittings, and in some cases you may have to loosen the clamp a little bit, and make sure you put the clamp in the indentation where it was mounted before. Take your finger and push on the rubber hose to find the tubing, and make sure you have plenty of space that the hose is up onto this fitting here. You can push with your finger. You want to make sure you have a good coverage of that hose onto the fitting. And then again, put the clamp into a easily locatable location, so the next time you go to pull these hoses off, it's real easy to get to the hose clamps. Snug up your hoses, and this braided sleeve protector then rubs on the frame so you won't wear through into the hose. Now we can get the guard, and we can put that up in place. Let me go to the front and make sure that's lined up properly. Not sure if you can see, the bottom bracket is for the radiator is right there, and you have to make sure you have a slightly longer bolt than the bolts we used up in the top to mount to the frame. Inside of this mounting point is a spacer. You want to make sure that spacer doesn't fall out. You want that spacer to go in between that rubber grommet there. So we get the screen and we put the mounting bracket of this screen on there, and then what we want to do is we want to lift up until you can see light coming through that hole. Okay, I think it needs a few cuss words, so I'm going to pause the camera here and use some choice words to get that bolt in. Okay, we've got it. I've taken the bracket from the aftermarket grid and put it behind, resting on the actual bracket that mounts to the motor. And then I tried to start that with my fingers. That seemed to work a little better. So we got that bolt in, and now we have it tight. Unfortunately, there are no mounting points on the aftermarket bracket to the radiator. So what I'm going to do is take the bracket and safety wire it to the top of the radiator. But we have the radiator in now. I'll go and I'll tighten all of the bolts up, double check the hose clamps to make sure they're all tight, and then we can say that the radiator has been mounted. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.